probably everybody's had this feeling out there when time slows down. Things are almost in slow motion and your mind is working so fast and processing so well. Man, I remember coming back to the sideline and they're, you know, you made a great play. And they're like, what'd you see there? And I'm like, well, you know, at the snap, I saw the cornerback back up over here. Then I snapped the ball and the safety came down. Boom, I saw Tyreek running this. And I hit, like, you know what I'm saying? Like that. Well, then you watch that real time and you're like, well, that all happened in half a second. You know, but on the field in the moment when you're locked in, that happens slow like that. And I do think it comes from, and this is something that absolutely, once I had become far more self-assured and, you know, comfortable in my own skin, knowing that my best was good enough, right? And for me, echoing that to my teammates became a priority. And I would do it all the time. And oftentimes I was talking to myself just as much as them, as these young guys, but like, you don't need to do anything extra. Right? Like there's nothing superhuman you need to go do today as we're getting ready to go play this game. Like you just need to go do your job and embrace being yourself, even your style of leadership, your personality, like embrace that, you know, letting your personality show. Don't try to be anybody else.
Hi, I'm Chris Waddell. Welcome to Living It, the podcast where we join experts in the experience of being human. Be bold. Say yes to adventure. Say yes to living it. Welcome to Chris Waddell Living It, where we talk with experts in the experience of being human. We've got a guy who is most definitely human in this one. Alex Smith was the #1 pick in the NFL in 2005 by the San Francisco 49ers. He went to 3 Pro Bowls, 16 years in the NFL. This is kind of interesting. Graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in economics in 2 years. One of the most gruesome injuries and one of the most amazing comebacks in the history of the NFL. He also started the Alex Smith Foundation, dedicated to giving foster youth the tools and resources to transition into adulthood. Alex, welcome.
Chris, thanks for having me, man. Look forward to talking.
This is so cool to have you in here. I really appreciate you joining us. You know, as I was doing my research, I was thinking about, you know, there are just so many different parts of what you're doing. And an amazing football player, amazing recovery, success, all this stuff. But as you were growing up, did you have goals that were from like 40 years plus? And I think there's a right answer. I mean, in some ways it feels like there's a right answer, but I was looking at it, I felt like for me, so much of it was front loaded. Like it was the sports stuff. And then the rest of the stuff was sort of this amorphous kind of like fairy tale, like, all right, and then life is good afterwards. For you, did you look at what life might be like after 40 years old? Not that you're there yet, right?
No, when I was a kid, I don't think I probably imagined, being an older adult. You know, certainly you dream about being in your prime. You dream about what you're going to go do and accomplish in your life. And, you know, obviously like most kids, those are usually like big things, big ideas. I don't know if I imagined, what life would look like after 40, what type of dad I would be, you know, what kind of husband, what kind of person, you know, obviously I think what I would even be doing at that point. So no, to answer your question, no, my distinct goal, you know, I never thought I would play professional sports. Like I was the kid, I think, that was almost too realistic. You know, I knew the odds. You know, and I'm like, it's not gonna be me. I did have a small goal as a kid that I wanted to play. I wanted to be a college student athlete. I wanted to play college sports. You know, I didn't know what sport that was. I played a ton of sports growing up. Certainly football was a love of mine, and I grew up in a big football family, but that was kind of my goal. I love the idea of the student athlete. I love the idea of being part of something bigger than yourself. I love like for me, Saturday mornings were so special watching college football, and the relationship between the student section and the guys on the field and playing for them and the band. And like, everything about that atmosphere was something that I wanted to be a part of. And so that was it. I mean, I think beyond that, I didn't have any crazy, I had a lot of interests. I hadn't narrowed any of them down yet, though. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I really liked school. I liked learning, and beyond that, like I said, I was just kind of enjoying the process.
Your father was a football coach, right? But he wasn't your football coach in high school, was he?
So my dad was a longtime football coach who then got into administration. So he was a high school principal for almost 30 years, and he was my high school principal. Um, he was a doctor of education, obviously highly educated himself, and so it would be an understatement to say that education wasn't a high priority in my house, growing up. And so there was this great balance, and I think that goes hand in hand with what I'm talking about being a student athlete. Yeah, I have my dad who played college football himself and coached a long time, but certainly it wasn't something that was ever put above your education. It was really kind of a privilege to be able to do both. But certainly school came first, and it was always had to be kind of that privilege had to be earned, so to speak, in the classroom. So yeah, it was. I think that's kind of where the foundation of my beliefs in both of those kind of come from my dad.
So that's interesting. Back to my original question, in some ways, it was you didn't really plan for it because sports are weird, right? Sports are weird where you have to plan to have another career after you finish your
Yeah.
career
Yep.
because it's going to end sometime in your 30s. If you're lucky, it's going to end in your 30s.
Yeah.
And then you move on to whatever's next. But for you, I mean, it's kind of interesting. When did you know that, hey, I might have a chance to do this? I might have a chance to go like Division I football, and then there might be a stepping stone to whatever's next. Because you went number 1, so something happened along the way somewhere.
Yeah, it did certainly, and I think it wasn't overnight. It was a process. I mean, to flash back to my high school experience, I didn't play football till high school. And my freshman year, I played freshman football. I was this. I mean, I was like 5'7" and 100 pounds. I was one of the slowest guys on the field, and there were no expectations. I mean, I wasn't the kid that like, oh, that kid, he's going to go play Division I football one day. Like no one was talking about that about me. I barely made the high school team, and so, but there was a lot of freedom in that, and I loved football and I loved playing. So I didn't really care anyway.
Were you
I
a
played JV.
quarterback all
I
the
played
time?
quarterback. I played
Okay.
quarterback. My older brother played quarterback, so I naturally wanted to,
Okay.
play the same position. And then my sophomore year, I played JV. I mean, not a standout at all. And but again, I kind of had this dream I was working towards it, and I was really kind of a late bloomer. And my junior senior year, I played on varsity, and I think that's when I started to get the self confidence that I could do it. Really where it embedded deep down in that like I think I can go play Division I football, and I really wanted to find out the answer to that. Right? I thought I could, and I was really determined to go find out the answer. So I was fortunate enough to play for a great high school program. My high school running back happened to be a guy named Reggie Bush, who was pretty good, and 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 naturally we ran the ball a lot. So I did a lot of handing off. Well, it was kind of a blessing and a curse because with Reggie, we had a ton of college recruits on campus all the time. I mean, he was one of the most, highly recruited players in the country. But at the same time, I didn't throw the ball, so I couldn't get recruited. Like I think I averaged like 6 passes a game my senior year. So long story short, I ended up getting one scholarship offer. I'm one, and it's the University of Utah. And on the flip side of this coin, I had done really well in school, and so I got into several Ivy Leagues to go play and to play football.
Okay.
But they don't give scholarships, and it's 1AA, which is awesome. But again, like I said, I'd had this itch that I was like, I think I can play Division I football, and I really kind of wanted to find out. And here I had this one school, the University of Utah, offer me, and I was very familiar with Salt Lake and that entire region. And so I tripped up there. I loved it, and I remember as crazy as it was at home. I'm like talking to my parents. I'm like, I think I'm going to Utah. I think I'm not going to Princeton and Harvard and Dartmouth or Penn. Like I'm going to Utah, and looking back, obviously kind of a crazy decision. Certainly both my parents, but especially my mom, had a hard time with it when I was making the decision. And so again, here, not zero aspirations when I'm 18 years old, and I go up to Salt Lake, kind of living my dream. I wanted to see if I could play Division I football, and here I am. I'm getting to be a student athlete, at this amazing school, and I'm kind of just living every day, loving it. And again, no expectations on me. Like when I got up to campus, again, it wasn't like, oh, that kid's gonna play pro football. Like, no, I mean, I was this completely unheralded, you know, unrated, no star recruit that went up there. And so I say that again because there was a lot of freedom in that. Just every day, I just kind of made the most of every day. There were no expectations on me. I just loved, um, again, what I was doing, and I was completely in the moment every single day. Like I wasn't thinking about tomorrow. I wasn't thinking about a pro career, and um, again, just was trying to find and reach my potential. And then the great, yeah, go ahead. I mean, the bizarre
Well,
thing was,
it's interesting you talked about the Ivy League side of things, because had you gone to the Ivy League, you would have played against Ryan
yep,
Fitzpatrick, right? Who
yep,
went to
yep,
Harvard,
yeah.
who had a long career in the NFL and is still going, I believe, right?
We're the same draft year,
Yeah, that's what I'm
and when
saying. You guys were the same
yeah,
draft year.
so I left. I retired after my 16th year. The only other two quarterbacks still playing were Ryan and Aaron. And so
Right.
Ryan, yeah, 17 years. So Ryan made 17. We'll see if he plays another one. He and I are really good friends. And yeah, and crazy enough, not only would we potentially played against each other, we potentially would have been on the same team, which should have been crazy. Um, yeah. So yeah, you would never have thought that, right? Like, and how many kids go to the Ivy Leagues and end up thinking they're going to have a 17-year pro career? And obviously, Ryan pretty unique in that regard.
Really unique, and just seems like a really unique guy, and two of you in some ways similar kinds of paths too. I think we'll get to some of this, just in terms of being really efficient, but not necessarily highly touted, and sort of easier to move to somebody else when you guys might well be the best decision. So we'll talk more about
Yeah.
that
All right.
as we get on. But when so in college, so you went to college and you played for Urban Meyer at Utah, right?
Yeah, so he's not who recruited me though. A coach named Ron McBride was the coach that recruited me to Utah, and we didn't have a very great season. This is my freshman year. I mean, I've only been on campus a few months, and the coaching staff gets fired. And so here I am. I took this, kind of leap of faith to go up there and figure this out. And the season went south. It wasn't very fun. I was redshirting. I blew my red shirt on 7 plays. So I'd lost this year of eligibility. It wasn't very productive for me. Um,
What do
and
you
so
mean
it's
you blew
hard.
your
So
eligibility in 7 plays?
yeah, so I was redshirting to begin the year, and back then they have different rules now. But if you play at all, midway through the year, they decided to make a quarterback change, and so me and one of the other quarterbacks, kind of competing for the job, and they elected to take me out of my red shirt, kind of with the promise that I was going to play every game, I was going to get a bunch of playing time and experience, and that would be the trade-off. Of course, when you're 18, I'm like, sure. Um, and so, but it ended up obviously with the coach's jobs on the line. That ended up being a total of 7 plays, one of which was a pick six back in San Diego against, my entire high school there against the San Diego State Aztecs. So it was not as, I mean, to call it, I mean, it was a terrible freshman year. It was bad. I mean, on all accounts as a team, and from my experience, investing so much in, and then I, really felt like you kind of got taken advantage of, or kind of a victim potentially to the situation. Obviously the coach's job's on the line. They're trying to win games, and, they're not really worried about a freshman's playing time at that point. But yeah, burn my year. So there goes my freshman year. Now I'm, but I'm still at this point kind of wondering if this was the right decision I made. Uh, Transferring was always potentially an option, and then we hired this no-name coach from a school I'd never heard of, Bowling Green, this no-name coach named Urban Meyer, who came in and he was running this system where the quarterback runs the ball 25 times a game. And at this point, I mean, I'm 6'4", and maybe I'm 175 pounds, soaking wet, and I'm not an athletic quarterback. I'm a drop back kind of stiff QB, and so this Urban's coming in with this unique system, and you're like, man, where's this going to go? And obviously, it was, for me, ended up changing my life.
Yeah. No, so
Yeah.
you're saying your freshman year, but you started as a junior, you said, as well, academically.
Yeah. So academically, I came into Utah as a junior. It was crazy. I remember sitting in our counselor's office. I'd taken a bunch of AP tests when I was in high school, and I knew I'd scored well on a number of them, and so was anxious to see how many the school accepted. And it's kind of a school by school basis based off your scores and the test itself, like what subject it is, whether or not they take them. And so I remember sitting in the counsel's office, like, well, how many, waiting for the info to come in, and it ended up being like 64 credits, and I was officially a junior, starting my freshman year. And so it was like, wow. I mean, it was great. I remember obviously not expecting that at all. But yeah, all of a sudden I had to pick a major. I mean, I had like that first semester, I had to pick a major because I was going to begin, obviously, I was done with my undergraduate at that point, as far as my, general study stuff goes. So picked economics, and it started that, but I was a junior in school. I was a freshman athletically
And how many years did you compete for the school?
So I played 3 total years at Utah. So, and I have 4 years of eligibility. So I had completely, my last year, I was under the assumption I was coming back. I never thought I would leave early and give up a year of eligibility to go play pro football. That was crazy. So no, I ended up graduating. I got my degree in economics in 2 years. I started my master's in economics, and was, obviously completed a full semester of that before I elected to leave school. So crazy that 2.5 years after, I was an 18-year-old and one school offered me, 2.5 years later, here I was electing to come out. I still, I mean, I was such a late bloomer physically. I still feel like I was kind of just figuring out my body at that point. Still kind of clumsy in a lot of regards. And yeah, here I am. I'm going to train for the combine and to play pro football and go to the NFL draft. And never would have imagined it in my wildest dreams, especially at that point in my life. But obviously it kickstarted a journey for me that, again, it's obviously been incredibly magical and life changing. And looking back on it, every draft year, we just had the draft. It's always kind of brings back a lot of memories about that time in my life.
So had you filled out? I mean, you said you were 6'4", like 175 when Urban had you running 25, and you're like, I'm used to handing off to Reggie Bush. He's the guy who runs. I don't run.
Urban, once I had kind of, that next year, there was a quarterback battle, and the starter, Brett Elliott, ended up breaking his wrist, and it kind of gave me the job. This was really early on in the season. But yeah, I kind of became the starter. No, I still ran the ball a lot. And Urban and Dan Mullen were on this mission to have me gain weight and get bigger. Because, hey, I'm a 6'4" kid. I should weigh 230 pounds,
Right.
And, I would, like, in the weight room, obviously I was, I trained really, really hard. I'd have strength coaches eating with me that constantly would make sure I was eating more. There'd be these, I couldn't leave the weight room until I drank so many shakes, protein shakes. Like, I remember, like, the point where you're nauseous and vomiting, and like, it just was a disaster. Like, I couldn't leave until, like, I had gained so much weight on, because they'd have a scale right there. So you'd have to weigh in and be like, oh, you weigh 193 pounds. You're not leaving here until you're 195, kind of thing. And you'd be like drinking these metric shakes back in the day until you weighed one. It was just like brutal. But yeah, it was definitely a focal point for me to try to gain weight, but never ever was real successful at it all the way through my professional career. I just, eventually I obviously kind of gave up that this is my body. I'm always going to be a little bit leaner. I'm never going to weigh 230 pounds.
Which is probably a good thing now.
Yeah, it's great. And it was fine for football. I just, I again, there was always this mold once especially there, that turned pro. They're like, well, this is what quarterbacks look like, and you got to look like this, right? Like, this is the mold. And when I came into the league, that still kind of existed, that prototypical pro style quarterbacks in a pro offense, this is what they look like. Even over the arc of my career towards the end, it's obviously it's been fun to watch and see that all get broken. And now that offenses have changed and there is no more kind of pro style offense, guys are playing all kinds of aggressive shotgun spread out quarterbacks with all kinds of skill sets and tools and letting them using them. So it's even over the arc of my career to see that change was great. It kind of also a little bit telling. Like I felt like when I first entered the league, I had to be this other type of quarterback to prove that I belong. And it took several years to kind of like, hey, wake up call. Like, well, no, I can play my own style. I can be my own type of quarterback. And took several years to kind of learn that and get comfortable with that, though. When you're young, you're heavily and easily influenced by kind of a lot of the noise out there.
Well, and also, I mean, your career went from, you weren't highly touted in high school. You got recruited by one school. You became the starter because the starter broke his wrist.
Yep.
And then you go number one, and then you go to San Francisco, which had a fairly decent history of quarterbacks recently. I mean, Joe Montana, Steve Young.
Slightly. Yeah.
So you talked about in your TED talk that Jim Harbaugh said something that sort of opened things up for you and allowed you to play. What was that, and why did you need it?
Yeah, well, to go back when I was in college and playing, like, Urban had come in and we were on a roll. Again, I never thought about playing pro football. I was loving every day of this, and it was literally kind of what I was dreaming college football was like. Like I loved like the culture of the atmosphere was all about the team first, and we were and back then Utah was in the Mountain West. We were this small school trying to do bigger things, and it was a bunch of kids just like me that like dreamt that they could, and a lot of people told them they couldn't. And so we went on this incredible run, and we're the first school to break down the BCS. We went undefeated, and went on to the Fiesta Bowl and beat Pitt pretty handedly. And it was just this amazing experience. And I lived every day, again, not thinking about tomorrow. I wasn't thinking about a pro career. And when I played on the field, I played with that kind of edge. Like I played overly aggressive, trying to make the play. Like, I mean, we were determined. We were kind of egging on when we could play the big schools, when we got to play the Oregons, the Michigans, like we wanted that because we were out to prove something. And so we all played with that kind of an edge. Well, fast forward, all of a sudden, I like to come out. I get drafted number 1 overall. I'm on the front of every newspaper in the country. And I go to the San Francisco 49ers, a team probably steeped in great quarterback play. And I was 20. I mean, I was literally 20 years old when I got drafted. And so all of a sudden, I'd never dealt with those kinds of expectations ever. Not from the outside, not even internally. And I struggled with it for a long time. I really struggled. I tried to be perfect. Like out of practice and on the field, I felt like I had to be perfect. I felt like I couldn't make any mistakes at all, even the slightest. And you can imagine, so going out to try and play professional football as a rookie or as a second-year player, and you're tiptoeing around trying not to screw up. I mean, you're playing with the best athletes in the world. Going out there with that kind of mindset, you're just set up to fail. And I did. My first several years were incredibly inconsistent.
And like Montana back in the day, I mean, they used to say about like Montana that in practice, the ball never touched the ground.
Yeah, I would hear that all the time too. Like, like that. And so you're trying to achieve this perfection. And I remember just like, you're out there, but your mindset goes the other way. You're out there literally like, I can't let the ball hit the ground. I'm aiming every pass. I'm trying to be perfect. Like that's just so unrealistic. And it's not how sports should be played. And that's not how you compete either. Right. I mean, again, to go out to the heart of competition, you got to go out there and cut it loose. Right. I mean, obviously as a quarterback, there's a lot of processing and thinking and decision-making that goes into that. But really it should always be to go out there and make the play. Right.
Try to succeed as opposed not to fail.
I spent the first, 4 years of my career doing the exact opposite. And I was so consumed with what people thought about me. I was so determined to prove that I was worthy of this pick. And I wanted to justify it so bad that it almost, I became literally my own worst enemy. It consumed me. And then, you know, that again, that self-doubt, like that imposter syndrome. Was I really deserving of the number one pick? Did I belong there? That always kind of sat in the back of my head too. And yeah, and a lot of it changed um, with when Jim came in, honestly. Here's a guy that had a long career playing quarterback in the NFL. He played my position. Now he's coaching. He'd had a bunch of success coaching, and he embodies that kind of that the flip side of that coin. Jim really doesn't care what anybody thinks about him, right? At all. And I mean that in the best of ways. Like, and for me, here I was kind of consumed with it, and a guy comes in, and he was a great example for me of that. Like, whoa, well, like I kind of, that looks pretty good over there. I've been trying it this other way, you know, mentally, and that this is not a great way to live life at all. I don't care what you're doing, let alone trying to play professional football, play quarterback. And so Jim really kind of was that example. And I do give that saying he would say before every game, every single game he would say it. And I remember the first time he said it, like, oh, like I'd never heard a coach say, "Don't worry," you know, like play as hard as you can and as fast as you can, as long as you can, and don't worry, you know. And I felt like he was speaking directly to me because I was worrying too much. Like, you know, here right before kickoff, those were oftentimes the hardest moments for me leading up. You know, you play once a week, so as you get closer to Sunday, the intensity just ratchets up, and pregame is probably when it's at its height. And I was probably in my head the most, you know, wondering, oh God, what if this happens? Am I going to screw up? What, I mean, like, am I going to play good? You know, you're worried about all these things that, again, have nothing to do with you going out there and doing your job. I really kind of was distracting myself with my own internal monologue. I wasn't allowing myself to focus, which to do anything great requires tremendous focus. And so I really had become my own worst distraction. And then all of a sudden here I had this coach that's like, I felt like really talking to me in that regard. You know, don't worry, stop worrying, go play, you know, focus on what you need to do. And again, as he also made it so great as a quarterback that I really felt like it wasn't all on my shoulders. Sometimes I'd felt like that, like I had to shoulder the load. Whereas when I was in college playing at my best and even at the NFL, like really as a quarterback, you're kind of the point guard. You're just the distributor of the football. And if the play tells you and your rules tell you to throw it over here, you throw it over here. If they tell you to chuck it deep, you chuck it deep. But you don't force it. And with Jim, I really felt like I kind of got back to that, where like there's a calmness in that, you know, like just go do your job. If they tell you to throw the flat route, throw the flat route. You know, if the defense tells you, you know, and I could just go do that. So like, I think the combination of that really did kind of help change my career. Because at that point, it was really sink or swim kind of territory for me in my career. You know, at that point, I'd be lying if I said the word bust didn't just sit in the back of my head. At that point, you
But you
know,
started to
haunting me.
perform like a number one then, though.
Yeah, but yeah, so you know, finally, uh, and it was amazing. It was like, yeah, obviously, again, it was like I felt like I'd been through so much turmoil personally, and as a team, we had so much dysfunction. You know, my first years in the league. You know, when you get the number one pick, you go to the worst team in football, and we'd had like regime change and trying to build new culture and hadn't had any success with it. So I'd been a part of a lot of turnover and not a lot of stability early on in my career. And Jim really kind of and his staff really provided that for me for the first time. And yeah, it finally took off. Finally started playing good and felt like I was headed towards reaching my potential finally. You know, and it felt great to play with that level of consistency, to be accountable to your teammates. You know, was an amazing, you know, feeling. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting also. I mean, you did the accountability with the teammates. You were the leader, you know, you say the point guard, but you were leading the team and the team was getting better and you were getting better. And you were ranked third ranked in QB rating, QB ranking, and number one in percentage, right? 70% of your passes, like you really weren't letting the ball hit the ground in games when it mattered. And Jim, this guy who opened it up for you, then was the guy who said, yeah, you're doing that, but then we're going to bring this other guy in. I mean, granted, you had a concussion and stuff like that, but the door opens. How is that the guy who gave you your opportunity all of a sudden isn't the guy who's continuing to give that opportunity or continuing to believe in you?
Yeah, it was tough. That first year with Jim, we went to the NFC Championship game. We were on the doorstep of the Super Bowl. Felt like in a lot of ways we should have been there. And so here we are, this was the first time I was having the same offense for 2 years in a row. Was Jim's second year. And it was like, obviously, yeah, here we go. Finally, year 2 of an offense. Let's go take this to the next level. Obviously, we had a great team. Yeah, and I led the NFL that year. I mean, through however many games it was, 10, 11. In a bunch of categories. And feeling like, again, like I'm just starting to ascend and finally like reach my potential and play, where I had thought about going as a football player. And yeah, boom, all of a sudden a concussion and flipped for me. And, obviously Cap came in and went on a historic run. I mean, those first, 7-8 games of Cap's career, I mean, really were like meteoric. I mean, he still holds records, from that run. And then we go to the Super Bowl. I got a captaincy on my chest, still, and I'm standing on the sidelines, and it just, a crazy turn of events, how quickly, life can change and that can be taken away from you. And it was an amazing learning experience for me. Because again, here I was, prior to that, I'd been the number 1 pick, a team heavily invested in me. I'd had a very rocky start to my career, but I've been given lots of chances, right? Like more chances than most. The undrafted free agent wasn't getting as many chances as I got, right? I mean, just naturally. And so it had taken several years, and I finally found my footing, and I felt like I was, again, ready to go. And then boom, it gets kind of pulled out from under you. And so for me, it was such a great reinforcement of like, again, what a privilege it was, right? On the flip side of that coin, early on in my career, it
Were you able to
so
see that in the moment? The great privilege. I mean, and the Cap you're talking about is Colin Kaepernick, right? Who came in.
Yep, Colin Kaepernick. And so for me, again, early on in my career, being a starting quarterback was uncomfortable in the NFL because there was so much weight and expectations with it. And I really had such, again, going back to that, I had such a bad mental attitude toward it. Like I was trying to be perfect. I was like, I didn't really embrace it, And so then all of a sudden, here I was starting to play well. And then, Colin gets the job and takes off. What was again for me that I was determined that if I did get another opportunity, and I was confident that I would, I didn't know when or where, but I was going to make the most of it, right? And this was a privilege. I didn't know how long this was going to last. I didn't, but I wasn't going to be distracted anymore by myself, by anybody else. I was going to be locked in and go run with this thing, as long as and fast as I could, And so it really did reinforce that for me. So yeah, then again, we obviously lost a heartbreaker in the Super Bowl. And I'm on the trading block, and I get traded to Kansas City, who again is the worst team in football. They have the number 1 pick. They won, 2 games or something the year before. But again, part of a culture change. Andy Reid coming in, and he trades for me, and that was it. I was determined, because based off everything that happened, I was going to go again. I wasn't going to be distracted by anything, especially myself, and I was going to go run with this opportunity for as long as I could and make the most of it. And so I think all those experiences, the 8 years prior to that, the good and the bad, really helped me teach all those things. That I think to get to a great, healthy place where I confronted and embraced being a starting quarterback now. Like Sundays were like, I'm not going to get to do this forever. I'm going to make the most of it while I can. And isn't this amazing that there's only 32 guys in the world to get to do this, and I'm one of them. And it's hard. It's incredibly hard, but I think I'm up for it. And then that was such a different mindset to where I started my career, shying away from it, and didn't, like, when I was having all that doubt and trying to be perfect and wondering if I belonged, that was something that I thought I was the only one going through it, in the locker room at that point. And I kind of buried that. I buried it, and I tried to pretend like it wasn't there. Well, it's funny, you start playing long enough, and I played around enough teammates, a bunch of Hall of Famers, you realize no, everybody deals with it. Everybody has that voice. The good ones confront it and move beyond it, right? Like they don't, no, this is really hard what we're trying to do. of course, it's naturally going to make mistakes, and yeah, we all have self-doubt, but like those guys were able to move beyond it and again lock into what they had to do at a better level, right? Like the focus on the details at a higher level. And so um yeah, really kind of, and then for me again, that 5 year run in Kansas City only solidified that even more. It was the best years of my career. um
Well,
you know
you went to the worst team again. So
yep
second time to the worst team, and built that team back up to the precipice again. And
uh,
then there's Patrick Mahomes.
yep yeah yeah, it happened all over again. I mean, we went in Kansas City and won our first 9 games. We were the worst team in football the year before, and we won 9 straight, went to the playoffs that year. We went to the playoffs 4 out of my 5 years there. I went to 3 Pro Bowls. And it was, again, I still felt like ascending. I get, yeah, at that point, I think I finished my 12th year in the NFL, but I was still only 32, like, because I was so young when I got drafted. I mean, I felt like I could have played 10, 12 more years at that point, just the way my body had felt, and where I felt like I still was playing my best football. And yeah, then all of a sudden we move up in the draft and draft, obviously Pat. Um, and for me, that was at that point a big test for me again. How was I going to deal with that? And I remember distinctly thinking like, yeah, here's this. We drafted this kid first round, a ton of media noise about it, right? Like, is he going to take my job? The competition? What does this say? I'm constantly getting asked about it. Um, could I eliminate all those distractions? Was I going to look over my shoulder, right, while I'm trying to be a starting quarterback? Or like, again, could I block all that out? Could I eliminate all those distractions and go play football? And I knew we had a great opportunity in front of us. We had a great team. Um,
Is that
and
the game in a lot of ways? I mean, the game of
yeah,
like just being able to focus, just being able to have that tunnel vision, block out all of these distractions and do your job, do the thing, and really support your team as well, right?
yeah,
To put
yes,
your teammates in the best position to be successful.
yeah. I think
And
that's
is
kind of
that easy
anything.
enough, like simple enough in your mind to say, this is my job, the other stuff isn't?
I mean, I felt like I got there, and it was something that I really felt like I practiced that kind of a that kind of a mindset. And I did it. I did the same thing when I came home and was a dad. Like, I don't want to be distracted there, right? Like I think to be in the moment, right? To not, for me, so often I was always, you know, if you're in your head and you're drifting off some other place, or your self talk's taking you some other place. Like, so for me, football is where, yeah, that was my process for football, but I think that process is the same for anybody trying to do something at a high level, right? Like it takes a high level of focus to do anything great or hard. And so
What did you have
um,
to do in order to be able to focus in that way? Because it's not like it's just a switch that you flip, is it? It's not just like, oh, okay,
no,
I need to
no,
focus, I need to
no.
do this, I need to focus. And when I'm at home, I need to be present. When I'm on the field, I need to be present.
Yeah.
Are there any practices that you had to do, any strategies in order to put yourself in that position?
Yeah. I mean, I think the number one thing that I would do is breathe or meditate. Those are certainly practices that I still, like anybody, I there's times I'm better at it and I practice more often, than there's times I'm not. For me, I always would come back to my breath, like breathing, and focus on my breath, and just kind of,
When you're on the field,
recenter
or
me. Oh, I absolutely would do it on the field. TV timeout, sitting on the bench, pre-game, before games, absolutely. And I think that was probably the tool I used the most, as far as like a tangible tool. For me, though, was just kind of always practicing being present. That was, for me, anytime you feel yourself wander, it was about, okay, I'm wandering, confront it, and get back. And again, my breath usually was something that I could go to that would help me with that. Um, I think confronting that is the first step, though. You always got to realize that, okay, and
admitting you have a
it's human, and
problem?
it's human. I think that's the other thing. Like, it's human. It's not. This isn't something. Um, again, that you got to a point, like, I'd been in a locker room long enough. Like, everybody deals with these things, right? At heightened challenges, here we are. We're playing in a playoff game or something, or a huge division game, national TV, Monday Night Football, right? This heightened emotion and stress. What does it do to you, right? Again, and for me, it was about embracing it and confronting it versus shying away in those moments. And I think that also always helped me focus and lock in even more, right? Like, yeah, Monday Night Football, we're playing Peyton Manning and the Broncos. This is hard and this is amazing. And again, like, you're not going to get to do this forever. And, determined with all of that, the bright lights, that and the challenge of that, right? Can you go out there and lock in? And I think that for me, even as I step away from football, that I still use it like anything I want to go do. If I set goals, and try to reach something, and certainly it really helped me with my leg and my recovery. How do you go do hard things or achieve hard things or overcome adversity?
How much, because you'd been through so much in your career, even, I mean, one, starting at such a young age, which is unfair in a lot of ways, right? You're just sort of not mentally, emotionally ready for this whole
No,
thing.
absolutely not. Yeah.
And nobody had told you were great until they told you were great. And then all of a sudden, oh, now I'm great. I didn't realize I was great. Okay, thank you. Now, how do I act now that I'm great? And how much did you help your teammates, having had all of this experience, to be able to say, we do need to be in the moment. It's a huge moment, but we need to be who we are. We need to settle in. Because they talk about football as the sport where everything speeds up. And when it speeds up, then you're in big trouble. How do you slow it down?
Sure. Well, I think exactly that. You just said it. I mean, it speeds up in your head, and it speeds up because, again, you're distracted. And I think every person out there, and it happens for me on the football field, because there really are, obviously I'm a living example. There's real consequences of playing this physical game, right? These are some of the biggest, baddest dudes in the world trying to get you. So it is a mechanism to force you to lock in. And for me, when you're playing the best, and probably everybody's had this feeling out there when time slows down, right? When things things are almost in slow motion, and your mind is working so fast and processing so well, and you're so locked in that, like, man, I remember coming back to the sideline, and they're, you made a great play, and they're like, what'd you see there? And I'm like, well, at the snap, I saw the cornerback back up over here, then I snapped the ball and the safety came down, boom, I saw Tyreek running this, and I hit, like, what I'm saying, like that. Well, then you watch that real time, and you're like, well, that all happened in half a second, but on the field, in the moment, when you're locked in, that happens slow, like that. And I do think it comes from, and this is something that absolutely, once I had become far more self-assured and, comfortable in my own skin, knowing that my best was good enough, right? And for me, echoing that to my teammates became a priority. And I would do it all the time. And oftentimes I was talking to myself just as much as them, as these young guys, but, like, you don't need to do anything extra, right? Like, there's nothing superhuman you need to go do today as we're getting ready to go play this game. Like, you just need to go do your job. And again, even kind of coming back to how Coach Harbaugh helped flip that for me, like, that's what I tried to echo, like, and embrace being yourself, right? Like, you're here to you be yourself. Even your style of leadership, your personality, like, embrace that. And again, for me, it was also great with Coach Reed. He really kind of embodied that too, letting your personality show. Don't try to be anybody else. And I think if we all do that collectively, right, and we're all locked in, we got a better chance of success, you know. And again, also, I think obviously reinforcing the embrace it, right? Like, how special it is we get to go run out of this tunnel and do this, and like flip that, because I could feel like younger guys carrying weight. Obviously I knew it all too well, and so for me, oftentimes talking to those guys, yeah, like, flip it, man. This is amazing. Like, go out there and cut it loose. Like, be in the moment. It's hard. This is a hard thing we're trying to do, and isn't it amazing? So yeah, that kind of became certainly, and still is, right? Like, that's something I firmly believe in, and leadership, I think, falls in that bucket as well, because there's this, so oftentimes when you're young and insecure, you like this false idea of what leadership is, right? Like, it's some fake speech, or it's some rah thing, or you got to speak up, or you got to call a guy out or a teammate out, and I couldn't disagree more. This goes to the Patrick thing, like, people, and even the Cap thing, people want to talk about mentoring. For me, mentoring wasn't anything I, like, told those guys. It wasn't like I like wisdom in the film room that I was just like, yeah, here's the secret to playing quarterback. Like, that's not how it is. It was really more about me, the example I set, right? Like, how did I go about doing my job? And then those guys getting to witness that up close, right next to me, I think was far more powerful than anything I could have said to these guys. And we were teammates, right? Like neither of Cap, Pat, or me we didn't get to put ourselves in those situations, right? Like we were just, the team controls that, and you're just kind of obviously, you're a part of it, right? And so for me, again, it was about doing my job to the best of my abilities, and I was on my own track, and Pat and Colin were on their tracks, and those tracks weren't conflicting as much as the media would try to like say that, right? I had my path, they were almost more parallel. Like I'm trying to reach my potential, and if I play well, right, like, and I'm focused, like it doesn't matter what those guys do, right? Like I'm going to have a job, and so yeah, it was kind of I think all those things for me really, they all were part of the same, like
Well,
I
it's
said, kind of
interesting you
bucket.
say that because earlier you were talking about how all these things happen in a half a second. And
Yeah.
you saw what happened in that half a second, but you saw what happened in that half a second based on all the work that you'd done in the film room, because you were prepared for it. And football is one of the hardest sports in that your windows of opportunity are so absolutely tiny
Yep.
that it's like, okay, boom, boom, timing, and then everything looks great when the timing works. And when the timing doesn't work, things look really bad. But the other thing you talked about was the sense of like, you're up against the biggest, baddest people in the world. Like you guys are some of the freakiest of freaky athletes, where you get these guys who are 300 pounds who are running like 4.8 40s, and like you're not supposed to be able to do that.
Yep.
That they're as fast as you are, or potentially faster than you are. I remember, I mean, I'm from Massachusetts, so I apologize, but I remember at one point there was Vince Wilfork kept trying to get Brady to race him in a 40, and Brady's like, I'm not going to do it, because I don't think that Brady would have beaten Wilfork in a 40, so it wouldn't have looked good for him. But this is what you're up against. How do you, as the quarterback, knowing that you have your 3 seconds or whatever it is, or you've got to get it out in 1.7 or whatever it is, how do you know, how do you allow yourself that time to perform, knowing that this like avalanche of human body is coming
Yeah.
at you?
Well, yeah, that is the test, right? Like that's the challenge. And that's what it became for me, that especially as a quarterback, because if you play left tackle, you go study their right defensive end all week, right? You're really just looking at the defensive end. What kind of moves does he use? What kind of player is he? And you're prepping all week for that, right? And if you're a receiver, you're just looking at their corners, right? Like what kind of players are they? What kind of technique do they use? What do they do? Well, when you're a quarterback, I'm getting ready for all 11, right? Like I don't go against any one of them. I'm looking at their D line, their linebackers, their corners, their safeties. And
And
then
you're
I'm
11
also,
too, right?
yeah, and how weak, and and our matchups. But then I'm also looking at their scheme, right? Well, what's their defensive coordinator do? What kind of defenses do they run? What kind of, is it cover 2? Is it man? Is it 3? Are they heavy pressure? Are they not very much pressure? And you're really weighing all of that in, right? And then you have your game plan that week that you're putting together all week, and you go install. And the challenge is, especially as a quarterback, whatever your physical gifts are, but you're going to go out there and you're going to win up here first, right? Like like if you can't win up here, you don't have a chance. I don't care if you're doing it with your legs, your arm, or both. And so that becomes the number one challenge, right? Like that within that 3 seconds approximately, right? Like I'm going to get you guys. I'm going to get us in the right play. I'm going to make the right decision. I'm going to make the right read. I'm going to make the right check at the line of scrimmage. If I see this, boom, I'm countering it with this. And that becomes, a little bit like that is the right, that's the counter. Like, yeah, you guys are big and bad, but I'm going to get you, like, too. I'm going to make the quicker decision, the better decision, the more accurate pass, right? And it's going to be too much. It's going to beat you, right? And you think about the greatest of all time, Tom Brady. It's not even close. I mean, it's the guy that got drafted in the 6th round. Like, again, he couldn't race Vince Wilfork. He's from a physical gift standpoint, there is no anomaly. There's guys with bigger arms, stronger arms, faster, quicker, right? Like but I mean, it's up here, right? He's going to get you. He's going to get you more consistently, and he's going to make the better decision, the better path. Like, like, and I think that becomes what you rely on, and that's what the challenge is as a quarterback, and that's what you study all week for and dialed in. Like on Tuesday's film session, that's why you're so present in it, because you have to digest it and you have to prep for all those what ifs, right? Like all those contingencies. Like, God, if they call this play and bring this pressure on defense, like I got to get to this, and so that's what you're working for all week, so that in that moment, in those, half a second at the line of scrimmage, that it does slow down, that you saw it coming, you saw the signs, and you countered it with this, and that, I mean, like that becomes the best feeling, right? I mean, that becomes you holding up your end, you did your job, and that's the chess match, especially playing quarterback.
Performing with all this chaos around you. I mean, there's
Yeah,
just,
but
yeah,
yes, that you've hopefully, you're so locked in, you're the horse with like blinders, right? Like crowd noise, and if it is there, you're embracing it, right? That energy again, like when you do want it, like, yeah, in a big moment, like, again, how special this is, like how many people get to do this, but also for the most part, when you go out there, that you're not riding the roller coaster as a quarterback, right? Like the ups and downs, you've blocked that out. um at home with the crowd at your back, or on the road in a hostile environment with them cheering against you, you can block all that out because you're so locked in.
sometimes they do get to you though.
Of course, yeah.
And when you were in Washington, they most assuredly got to you. Do you
Yep.
remember that moment?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that absolutely. It was a third down. It was a big play in the game, and I remember it really well. They were in a pressure look. So this goes to this exact same scenario. They were in a pressure look, and all week we had talked about it. We get this look, I'm going to come up and make a protection adjustment. I'm going to slide the line one way, and running back's going to come over the other. We make this adjustment at the line, and obviously it's football, right? No one's perfect, and mistakes happen. And all of a sudden, I remember feeling two free rushers. There was their DB would come off the edge to the right, and then JJ Watt had also broken free. And so for me, really kind of even in that moment, when you're a quarterback, and we try to choreograph as much as possible. We talked about it. Part of football is very choreographed. Part of it is obviously complete chaos, and that's what makes it great. Well, there's times as a quarterback when you're trying to, I got to break out of a sack and make a play, or scramble and throw, and go, or maybe make a play with my feet. And then there's times you just concede a sack. And like for me, I remember distinctly thinking, like, just protect the football, right? Like that's all I was thinking. Like, I'm not getting out of this. Kind of cornered from both sides, and just protect the football and go down. And I feel like I've been hit harder or worse, 1,000 different times compared to this. But for whatever reason, in that moment, yeah, I remember my leg, a funny feeling in my leg, a feeling I'd never felt before. And immediately rolling over on the ground, and the visual confirmation of obviously my legs bending where it shouldn't. And yeah, knew immediately that I had broke my leg. Um,
That's the
right
weird
then and
part
there.
about
And
the pain, isn't it? That the pain doesn't come immediately. You sort of
no,
assume that it
no,
does, but it's like,
yeah,
okay, this is, oh, that looks weird. Is that
yes.
when you got the rush of like, uh-oh, I'm in big trouble now?
Yeah, it was I would call it almost no pain at first when it happened. You're in such shock. Yep. And then to roll over. I mean, I even grabbed my leg and like tried to semi straighten it. Like it hurt. Um, you're just in such shock. I knew immediately my leg was broken. I knew obviously it was a decent break. I was completely naive to the complexities of the situation, though. At that moment, like you hear about broken bones all the time. It's football. I've had hundreds of teammates break bones, and hey, they're out a couple months and they come back. Usually, like we have the best doctors in the world. They're going to put us together. And I remember thinking that my season was over, because we were kind of headed into the back half of the season. But other than that, no. I remember thinking I'm gonna be right back at it. I'm gonna be back at it spring ball, in 6 months, and I'll be right back to where I was, because again, I felt like I was still just ascending, from my career standpoint. I'll get right back to it, and obviously get on the cart, you get air casted, and certainly that's when the pain set in, and I got rushed to emergency surgery, and life obviously changed for me forever that day.
Well, in some ways though, right? Because the thing is, when you talk about it, it's broken bones, it's part of the game. This is part of the job. You're dealing with your job. Your job is a crazy job. Not everybody can do it. And that's part of what's really cool about
Yep.
you being able to do this job. You went into surgery, but then the next day you were upright, weren't you? The
Oh yeah.
next
Oh
day?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had
Upright,
surgery
upright.
walking with a
Yeah, I'm on
walker, right?
crutches. Yeah, I had emergency surgery. I had 3 plates put in, a bunch of screws, and woke up the next morning. Yeah, the surgery had gone well. My leg was aligned, and I needed to stay a couple nights um, for them to watch me and observe me before I could leave. And I had to be able to prove that I could get around on crutches. You know, there's kind of these protocols that make you mean. Like I got to be able to prove that I'm around the house. So yeah, there's like a PT there, and I got to go do this stuff. But yeah, I'm fully focused on. It was kind of right before Thanksgiving, and I'm like, I want to get home, and my family's in town. I want to get out of the hospital. You know, eat some good food, and start this recovery thing. And obviously, a couple nights in the hospital turned into a month in the hospital, and once the infection set in, and obviously he was in for a bit of a roller coaster. But yeah, that day after the day and a half after the surgery, no, I was looking forward to going home, getting out of there, and on the mend.
It's amazing because in some ways it was like that was the cost of doing business, right? Cost
Yep.
you're in this business, you break a bone. Okay,
Yep.
that's the
Yep.
deal. Now let's see how well you can recover or broke a couple of bones and broke them
Yep.
really badly, but at the same time, broken bones. And then the infection happens. So for me, I broke my back. And the only day that I cried in the hospital was I had a urinary tract infection. I was transferred from one hospital to another. My temperature spiked to like 103, 104. I got there. I just wanted to go to sleep. They packed me in cold compresses. They wouldn't give me a blanket and kept me awake and all of this stuff. And my mother was there. And it was the only day that I cried. I said to her, I don't want to be like this forever. And it was that loss of control. For you, was there that similar, like with the broken bone, it's almost like, hey, I still have control of what's going on. This gets to be rehab. This gets to be weight room. This gets to be stuff that I can understand. But
Yep.
then the infection hits you. And it's like, I don't understand. I might lose my leg. There are these blisters. You said that you didn't want to look at it.
Yeah. So exactly. I mean, I feel like those couple days, I'm getting around on crutches. I'm in the hospital. Life is great. I'm in that frame of mind you just talked about. Like I'm in control. And the last thing I remember, the last consciousness that I remember is my fever spiked. I went into septic shock, and blood pressure dropped and all these things. And I remember kind of the blur of, nurses and doctors coming in and out. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They thought it was coming from my catheter. They thought like all these other things. Where's the infection coming from? They're trying to figure it out. They don't know. And the last thing I remember is when they finally came back in, they looked at my leg a few hours earlier. It looked normal. They unwrapped my leg, and it was black. The entire front of my shin was black, and from the infection from what had become the necrotizing fasciitis, the flesh-eating bacteria. And I remember the alarm on their faces, right? And that's kind of the last thing I remember. And I got rushed into another immediate emergency surgery, and I had surgeries for like the next 8 days in a row, and then every other day after that for a few days. And when you're under anesthesia that many consecutive days, like you don't remember anything. So for me, the next almost 2 weeks are just a fog. And the next thing I remember is kind of coming to, almost 2 weeks later, uh, with the team of doctors in front of me and a bunch of doctors now that I don't recognize, and my wife, and they're explaining to me what happened. That this crazy infection set in. They had to go cut off. When necrotizing fasciitis comes in, they don't, that tissue is not coming back to life. So they just start cutting it out. And so you essentially just start cutting off your leg piece by piece. And the next day there's still more. So they cut out more, and they're just so terrified that it's going to spread. And because it is so quick spreading
Your
through your fascia.
looking at this, like, I mean, I looked at the photos, I watched some of the videos, like your leg looked like the leg of a cadaver. It
Yeah,
looked
yeah,
like I went to see that body display where they
yeah.
did all the bodies and all the, you see all the muscles and like, that's what you saw. That's not what you're supposed to see on the
No,
leg
no.
of a healthy human being.
So, after the 2 weeks, they'd removed, essentially it amputated half my leg. The front half of my leg was gone. And I'm not talking about just skin, the muscles, the tendons, um, gone and not coming back. And then, oh yeah, I also have this crazy gnarly break, right? The bone is still broken. All that hardware's got to come out because it was present during the infection. So we're kind of starting over from ground zero. Here, you're missing half your leg and you have this horrible break. And that's where the reality, that's what I wake up to. And certainly a bunch of opinions in the room are, this isn't salvageable. Like your leg's not salvageable. The outcome, it's going to be a crazy long road at best. Nothing's guaranteed. And probably the best decision is to cut your leg off. We should amputate this and you can move on with your life.
So that you stay alive, really. I mean,
Yeah.
that
And
was
at
number
this
one,
point,
right?
yeah. Also, yeah, they finally got got the infection under control. They felt like they had stopped it. They got me on several different antibiotics at this point that they felt like had got the infection under control. So they felt like, yes, that, the quasi have obviously saved my life and try to save my leg. And obviously they, if they had to, they were going to cut my leg off. Thankfully they caught it in time and got it under control. But now I wake up to this reality. And so that some doctors are still saying we should amputate. And then there's some doctors that are saying they can save it, and particularly the plastic surgeon in the room. Shout out to Dr. Meehan, if he listens to this. And he was the guy that really swayed me the most. His confidence that he could save my leg. But it was scary. He's talking about, Frankensteining parts of my body. He's like, I'm probably gonna have to take your lat muscle or your quad muscle or a muscle from here, and we're gonna move them down and put them down on your lower leg. And we hope they take. We don't know. If your leg muscle doesn't take, well, then we'll take one from your back. And then if that doesn't take, we'll take this. And now I'm like, wait, hold on. You're gonna start removing, like, I got good parts of my body, and you're gonna start taking parts of those, and it's freaking me out. I'm hearing all this medical jargon that I don't know, free flaps and all. What is that? But he was confident he could save it, and I elected to, and it was these series of procedures called limb salvage. Where there was this. It was going to be a long road. It was going to be years in this process to try and save my leg, but he thought he could do it, and I elected to do it. The outcome at that point, certainly the prognosis wasn't looking great. It was maybe stand again, walk. That was it. I mean, we weren't talking. There was no football talk or go do sports. So for me, I thought that part of my life was over. I serious doubts about what I'd ever be able to do again. I'm never gonna be able to ski. I'm never gonna be able to golf. I'm never gonna be able to hike. I'm never gonna be able to play with my kids, chase after them. I never thought. I thought that was gone forever.
The impossible part of the recovery, like looking at it and saying, okay, you got out of that point and then said, I'm going to play football again. And football's the ultimate, I will run through the wall to make this happen. And people are willing to sacrifice their bodies. I mean, what, like, average career is 3 years.
Yep. Yeah.
But you were different, right? I mean, you 16-year career, you were a quarterback, you had guaranteed money.
Yeah.
How did that work? Like the impossibility of the recovery, the willingness to sacrifice everything, to still sacrifice everything when you'd achieved some security. What was the driving force for you that said, yes, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to run through the wall? I think of like I'm going to give you two Riggins things right now. So Riggins from Friday Night Lights, right? Who sits there and the coach is doing the clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose kind of thing.
Yeah.
And his foot's just going, right? Going the whole time. It's the uncoiled spring, like ready to go. And then there's the John Riggins, who, when he and Theismann were inducted into the Ring of Honor, Theismann's out there at midfield in the suit waiting for everything to happen, and John Riggins came running out in full uniform and said, I didn't think I'd ever hear this again.
Yeah.
Like, what's the thing for you that you went, this is why I have to do this?
Yeah. I think for me, it's when I woke up again and these doctors are talking about cutting off my leg. And all over that span, for them, that happened over 2 weeks. For me and my like consciousness, that happened overnight, right? Like the last thing I remember was, I'm going home, I'm still in control of my life and my career. And then I wake up to, yeah, well, we're going to cut your leg off. Your life was in jeopardy. Your leg's still in jeopardy. Um, and, you're probably never going to, maybe you walk again, maybe at best, if this goes well. There were no guarantees. And so for me, all of a sudden it was just like, well, how did we get here? Like I was playing football. How did this happen? And then I just went down the spiral of like being stuck in the rearview mirror of my life, like thinking that the best part of my life was over, right? Like everything that had happened, like my life was over. And I would replay these things that I had done in my life, physically with my body, that I'm like, well, I'm never going to be able to do that again. I'm never going to be able to do that again. And again, like and then I have young kids. I had dreamed about the rest of my life with my family, the things we're going to go do. With football, you put off a lot and sacrifice a lot, but again, like, well, I'm retired. I'm going to be 36. I have all these years to go do these things. And like, well, then I was like, for me, it was like, well, I'm not going to be able to do them. It's gone. It got taken from me. And I really went down in the spiral. I was stuck in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. I had this metal cage bolted into my leg. I'm having all these procedures done, flaps and skin grafts. And there were no one had gone through this before. So there were no athletes for me to look to that had overcome something like this. And again, I'm just really thinking I'm
Well,
just
like
wallowing.
Theismann never played again, right?
Yeah, it ended his career, and he obviously didn't have the infection, and this was career ending, and regardless of that, for me, it was more about my life. Like for me, it was about images, like just doing things with my kids and my wife, and everyday life things that I'd never be able to do again. And I'm just kind of wallowing in this self-pity, and I'm stuck in the rearview mirror of my life. I'm just looking backwards at these things I'll never be able to do again. And I go down, I got this clearance to go down and to the Center for the Intrepid, this military rehabilitation center. I got access. I got, granted this permission to go down and do some of my rehab because they were kind of the experts at this. And I couldn't even look at my leg at that time because I didn't want to confront what had happened to me. I didn't want to think this was a reality. I would wake up every day kind of hoping it was a bad dream. And again, no, it really wasn't. Every day that was a process for me. And I'm, again, not wanting to deal with it. And I get down to this military center and obviously, which is incredibly humbling, our servicemen and women that had really sacrificed life and limb and were horrible, double amputees, triple amputees, burn victims, a lot of servicemen and women with similar injuries to mine. And they're moving forward with their life, right? Like they're moving forward. They're confronting their injury and moving forward with their life. And I couldn't have been in a different headspace, a different mental space.
What was their reaction to you? Because you're coming in as this NFL star.
Yeah.
And they're probably, they're like, hey, Alex, will you sign an autograph for me? Will you do this? Will you do that? You were at the exalted status, I would imagine, there.
Yeah, for sure. Here's this professional quarterback coming in and rehabbing with them. And it was also the first place, though, like I had a connection. When I would go in for my doctor's visits and around the hospital, I'd never seen anybody with the contraption I was wearing. I'd never seen anybody with a leg like that had gone through what I had gone through. And all of a sudden I go down there and I'm like, a bunch of the guys are like, oh, I just got mine taken off. Or like, there was such a connection on what I was going through and they had gone through it and it moved beyond it. And I remember even thinking like, well, how do you get there? How did you get there with your leg? Right. Like these guys were walking around in shorts, like just owning their leg. And I'm like, mine's wrapped up. I'm hiding this thing. And
all these scars and
yeah. And so, but it was, again, that example, right? It's not anything they said to me. It was more of that example of how they were living their life, how they were confronting it, that it was really the place, as scary as it was for me, that I I said out loud, like, I want to go try and play football again. And I said it to, there were two big things. I said it really just because I knew if I could get close to it, like the rest of my life would be better. It wasn't necessarily just about football, but it also was the challenge of it. And it was about not being scared to fail, right? Like I wasn't scared if I said this and I didn't achieve it. I didn't care. Like I wanted to go try. I like they helped me confront what had happened and help again to like turn my view forward and like, let's go see what I can do. I want to go figure out what I can do. I'm not scared to try. I don't know where the road's going to end, and I want to go find out. And
Hold on
it
one
kind of really
second
helped
though,
me. Yeah.
because you started talking about like you wanted to be able to like you were worried you lost the time with your kids. You were worried you were not going to be able to play with your kids. But
Yep.
then if you recovered and you played football, then you might be back in that situation. You might have recovered and then lost that thing that you were hoping to get with your kids.
Well, so for me, I mean, when I said it, I didn't fully even think it was possible, right? I mean, it was so far away. I couldn't even walk. I couldn't stand. Um, and the prognosis was so bad. Like, I think everybody was kind of encouraging, because it's like, hey, go try that, Um, and so I thought the road would end for me far before then, but I really wanted to pursue and see where it went. I wanted to see what I had left, right? Like I wanted to go find out. I wasn't scared to fail or wherever that road did stop, right? Like I wanted to find out. And um
Was this a greater commitment than you'd ever had
oh
in
yeah.
sport?
Yeah, without a doubt. The scariest thing I've ever done. This just absolutely terrifying. Terrifying to say it. By the way, I'd elected to document this thing on ESPN, which was terrifying as well, right? I'm going to open myself up. I'm incredibly vulnerable. This is not looking good at all. Like, I mean, like again, amputation was on the table for over a year almost, like where they're like, nothing was guaranteed. Like, I was just so scared of all these things again. And I think to move past your fear, like to confront it and move past it, it was hard. Um, and so, yeah, I want to go play football again, but I didn't think I'd ever really get there, but I thought it would help me get my life back.
How did you
What,
measure your success? Sort of like daily, right? Because it
yeah.
was
So
such a
that's,
big
yeah,
deal.
I'm glad you said that because I think for me that goes back to all this. Like I put it out there that I want to play football, but after that, like I wasn't sitting in a wheelchair like thinking I'm going to play football. Like when I bolted into this thing, like I didn't. I think that would have been discouraging. For me, it was all about baby steps. It was like, well, okay, what can I do right now? Like, what can I do today in my PT? And like that's what like I focused on. It was like, okay, well, whatever that was, like I really kind of again put my blinders on. It was like, well, what do I need to accomplish here, right? Like I got to get stronger or I got to heal. And then once I did that, it was like, okay, well, what's next? Like, okay, well, I got to try and stand. And that's all I focused on was trying to do that. And I didn't focus on anything else. And if I achieved that small step, there was obviously a quick, celebratory, for me, like, I think those small little victories were important. And then it was like, okay, well, then I turned my attention to what's next. And it was always kind of a what's next mentality, right? Like I always was trying to just stay right in front of me. Like, what's the next step and trying to figure it out. And then once I got it, okay, well, what's next? And I didn't really look up.
This
For
is the
almost 2
being in the
years.
moment thing. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
exactly. Yeah, for almost 2 years I did that. And it got to the point where it was crazy enough that I was lacing cleats up and putting a helmet on. And I never thought I would get there. Um, and those final steps were the scariest because like, here I am, I'm going to intentionally run back out there again. Like I said, I kind of got my life back. Like you just said it, like as I neared the end, it was like, well, I can go run around with my kids now, like, yeah, there's an adjustment and I have to adapt every day, but I can go do that. And I'm confident that I can. And now I'm going to I've been working for this for 2 years and here I am. The next step is that white line, right? Like running out there and I'm going to go do this. This is nuts. Um,
what was it? Was it that you said you were going to do it? Was it like being a quarterback and proving that, I mean, you're the guy with the red jersey during practice. that you've got to prove that you're as tough as the rest of the guys, or tougher,
No,
or what is it?
no, I was terrified. I was scared. I was absolutely scared. No, I think it came down to a couple things. The experts had given me clearance, right? Like the people that really knew, the team of doctors, the military doctors, my team of surgeons there in DC, like the best of the best had said, you can go do this if you want to. So for me, it was about then, yeah, that voice in my head is like, God, what if your leg does break? What if it doesn't hold up? What if you go out there and make a fool of yourself? Like again, that self-doubt that creeps in. And there was a lot of it in that moment for me. Um, was I going to be controlled by that? I think that fear, that self-doubt, like, was that going to control me? Or again, could I block that out? Right. Like lock in on the facts, on what I, and the truth, and like, could I go do this? Right. And so for me, that kind of became, I thought a lot about regret, like in that moment, like, sure, if I walked off and just lived the rest of my life, I'm sure I could have, but here I'd been working towards this thing, and I never thought I'd ever get it back. And this opportunity was in front of me. And was I going to turn my back on it? As scared as I was, like, was I going to turn my back on it? Or again, could I block that out and not be controlled by it and go again? I'd been given the green light by the specialists, and I was going to go ahead with that. I was going to take that next step, and so for me, it was about that, not being controlled by fear, not being controlled by that voice in my head that I battled obviously over the course of my career, all the time. And so, yeah, I was determined to not fall victim to that. Everything that I had learned leading up to that in that moment, I think really helped me make that decision.
The specialist told you that you were okay, that you were medically cleared to go play football again. Your body could handle it as much as anybody's body can handle it.
Yeah.
When for you did you say, okay, I'm okay? Is it like, because that's your plant leg, right? I mean, you're going
Yeah, it's
back,
my back leg.
you plant and you throw.
Yeah.
Is it planting? Is it running? Is it changing directions? When did you say, okay, I think I'm okay?
There were a couple of different stages to that. There was the first one as far as just could I even move again, right? I have permanent drop foot. I have a bunch of tendons and muscles missing in my lower leg. So my foot function and foot control uh, was never going to be what it was, right? And could I go run? Like drop foot used to be career ending,
Yeah.
like you can go play with drop foot. And for me, kind of once I felt like on the practice field or even on my own throwing routes that like, okay, I can drop back and throw. I think I can do that. Now, do I have any change of direction? Can I run and sprint and cut? And trying to figure that out in a controlled environment. Um, and then in training camp, it was kind of like, okay, well, now can I do this with 11 guys around me and, 11 guys on defense?
Can I be on
And
time?
yeah, exactly. Can I do this? And, and all this being said, I'm not getting tackled yet, right? Like I in practice, I wear a bright yellow jersey. No one can touch me. So they're to begin to have some confidence there that like, well, I can do that. I can throw on time. I can move a little bit and protect myself. And I could kind of operate. Yeah, it's different. And again, I'm adapting, but I can operate as a quarterback. And the big looming one still was this getting tackled. And there was no preseason that year because of COVID. And so when I first ran out on that field, like the last big hurdle of is my leg going to hold up? I did in front of the country, and it was terrifying. I didn't get to do it in a closed environment, a safe place. Like, no, I'm running back out onto the field. I happen to be playing the number one defense in the NFL with the defensive MVP that year, Aaron Donald. Like, I'm going through this entire process mentally and physically in front of everybody. And that was really the last one for me. Getting hit, it was a disaster. It started raining. I got sacked like 6 times or something. It was a disaster. However, I was so frustrated after it. But for me, it really allowed me to move beyond my leg at that point. Like at that was like ripping the Band-Aid off. Like that was the final breaking down the last wall. I didn't think about my leg moving forward. I ended up starting 6 games after that I really played incredibly free. Um, I know everybody around me, my friends and family, everybody was worried about me out there. But for me, again, this had been taken from me. I never thought I'd have it back. And here I was playing football again at the NFL level. And I was determined to be in the moment and make the most of this. I knew it wasn't going to last much longer. Um, and determined to enjoy every single minute of it and to cut it loose and to end my career in that space where I I was out there again, like playing for my teammates, playing for myself, so locked into every moment. I couldn't care less about making a mistake. I didn't care what they were going to write about me in the paper. Like I didn't, any of that. Like that couldn't have been the furthest thing from my mind. And so for me to end my career in such a different place than how I started it and to have really kind of come, full circle, was incredibly gratifying. And I think what really allowed me again after that season to retire and walk away is because this was always bigger than football. It was more than football. I'd accomplished that, and you know, not the physical journey, although that's obviously part of it, but it was far more just the mental journey of like being comfortable with what the rest of my life looks like, and I'm excited about it. Um,
It's
for me waking up every day, like I don't remember what it was like not to have drop foot. For me it's weird. Like I don't dealing with these, my leg, like, and again, like bearing those scars, like I'm proud of my leg. I'm proud of what it can do, what it's been through. And that's such a, for me, that's the most fulfilling thing looking back on the journey is that mental journey.
it's interesting because I mean the physical scars you talk about, the mental scars as well. I mean, this has been a journey where, yeah, you've been scarred along the way. And that's representative of who you are today and what you brought to the game, what you bring to your family, what you bring to the world. It's interesting some of the things that you talk about too when it comes into focus in some ways, because that first game was during COVID, right? So you
Yeah.
played in front of almost no one in the
Yep.
stands. I mean, like you probably hadn't played in front of that few people since you were like 8 years old or something like that.
Freshman football. Yep. Yeah.
Exactly. So all of a sudden, but the frustration was the thing in some ways that crystallized it, which is the thing that as an athlete, it's like, well, don't give in to the frustration, like keep moving forward. But that frustration is like, no, this is real now. This is
Yeah.
this is real. This is the sport. It's not about all that extraneous stuff, all the worry. It's about, I'm frustrated about the way that I played. I'm frustrated that I got sacked. I'm frustrated about this. Moving forward, I mean, it's been so cool to hear your journey and to hear the arc of your journey. What do you like with your kids? What's the story that you tell them? What's your story? What's the story of your scars that
Yeah.
your kids take away?
Yeah. Again, I mean, that's funny. I think I've learned a lot about parenting as well. And I would be lying if I said that didn't greatly impact my career and growth as a person too. I mean, I think becoming a father was life changing. Um, for me, it comes back to, again, I talked about mentoring Pat and Colin, and it's not so much what you say, it's how you live your life and how I was going about my job, right? If I just went about my job in the right way and I had the right mindset, like that was the best example and gift I could give those guys. And it's funny that it was obviously most beneficial to me too. Like those are not mutually exclusive. And so, being a parent and a dad for me really is the same thing, right? It's how I go about my life, how I treat people, the things that are important to me, how I handle adversity, right? I think those things are the best example for my kids. It's not so much things that I'm imparting on them. Obviously, we talk all the time, but really, I think the best thing I can do is it's how I live my life, right? Like how I tackle things, how I go about every single day. Um,
Are you held to a higher standard now than you were as the number one pick in the NFL?
oh, it's far more meaningful. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like, I mean, I got three young kids that are incredibly impressionable, and I'm lucky enough they're at fun ages. They still think I'm kind of cool. Um, but yeah, like that, absolutely. And, but again, I do think it comes back to just, it's the same principles, right? Like being focused on the here and now, right? When you do wander or you do have doubt, like bringing yourself back, in the moment. And again, uh, I think embracing those things, right? Like embracing the challenge of it.
It is. And obviously family is so important to you, but your foundation works with foster kids, helping them transition, giving them the tools and the resources to transition into adult life. How did you come about working with foster kids?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was shortly after I got drafted and I was 20, 21 years old. And I started to get exposed and learn a little bit about what happened to foster youth, especially teenage foster kids as they emancipate the system, is what it's called. And back then, when you turned 18 and you were a foster kid, all government assistance basically ended. And you were kind of a lot of times dropped off at the shelter with your belongings and kind of wish good luck. I remember just thinking how absurd it was that that was in this country the reality of what we do to these kids who have been born into an unfortunate situation, no fault of their own. I was lucky enough to be born into a great family, right? Like my family still supports me. I'm, you know, 38 years old. So I remember thinking how unfair it was and how ridiculous it was that we expected anything. I couldn't imagine being 18 and worried about where I was going to sleep that night and what I was going to eat and how. And you're supposed to have some success there. You're supposed to there's supposed to be a positive outcome.
Even if you
And
had a
obviously,
great family,
yeah,
that if they say,
exactly.
okay, this is it, you're on your
Yeah,
own, go
I
do
wouldn't
it.
have made it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have made it. And so no, just thinking, and it how unfair it was. And so for me, again, education was incredibly important to me and still is. And so trying to build a structure and allow kids to further their education. Obviously, the outcomes were horrible. About half these kids ever graduate high school. Less than like 2% ever graduate college. And how do you, right? How do you make it on your own? You just don't. That's the answer. You don't. And so for me, it was about really kind of creating a scholarship program for high school kids and college kids to allow them as much as possible to be normal, to like not have to worry about where they're sleeping, to not have to worry about where their food's coming from. If there are bumps in the road, there's people they can turn to help them. To really kind of create that environment a lot like what I had, right? I mean, I have a great family. I had an athletic scholarship. Like there was always people for me to turn to help me get through school, right? Bumps in the road, grade checks, like that, accountability. And so I think creating that kind of environment um, is something, yeah. And again, like just it's kind of like the draft, like these kids, like they get, they're just unlucky to get born in that situation, and how lucky I am, and I'm determined to try and help make a difference. So it's something that I love doing. Yeah, it's almost been 15 plus years now with the foundation, and um,
And this just came out of a
and
speaking engagement. Is that how this all started?
no, I went to a forum and I listened to Antoine Fisher speak, who's a former foster youth.
Okay.
Obviously, his story got turned into a movie, and it was here in California, and kind of started to learn the realities again of what this whole emancipation process is for these kids turning 18, getting kind of turned to the street. And I wasn't that many years removed. It was 20, 21, 22, and I remember just thinking like, well, I remember I was there, and I couldn't imagine that if that was my reality. So, uh, determined to try and do more. You know.
Which is absolutely awesome. Alex, thank you so much for just sharing your story and sharing the insight into, I mean, you've done some absolutely amazing things. And we on the outside want to figure out how you did them, like how you got back onto the field.
Yeah.
These things are just mind-boggling to me. I mean, they're just so cool to hear. And you do it so affably with just a smile and and
Yeah.
so humbly. And that to me is really cool. So thanks for sharing with us, but thanks for being who you are too.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. It was great coming on. For me, I really do value when I tell my story, just being authentic. And again, I think that it's not just some crazy triumph, overcome all positivity. Like I just think that's such a false narrative. And for me, it's about being human and authentic. And these are things that we all deal with and struggle with in life, right? It all as it comes at us. And for me, I know the people that provided seeds of hope for me along my journey and helped me through those moments, and determined to kind of be a link in that chain, because again, it's something that we all go through in life. So yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a ton of fun.
No, it was also, hey, I've got to ask one more quick one, just along that line that you were just talking about, in that was it scarier that first hit after breaking your leg, after returning, or getting on the TED stage?
Both equally terrifying. Public speaking is like, uh, obviously scary, and then here you're at TED. I'm a football player and I'm speaking at TED. Um, Luckily, with TED's filmed and they can kind of edit a little bit, so that was always a saving grace. There wasn't real any editing power running out onto that field with Aaron Donald. That's what you see is what you get. It's easily the scariest thing I've ever done. It's
Okay.
just, I mean, to be honest, terrified to go out there. But TED as well. But that's again, it's so weird to me. I never thought I'd speak. It's part of what I do in life, and again, I do enjoy just being authentic and real, and the good and the bad. And it was fun to do that at TED as well.
Well, you do a great job
Yeah,
of the authentic thing, which is a challenge for everybody in the world.
yeah.
So thank you for doing that. We look forward to whatever is coming next. So thanks a ton. And for all of you who've tuned in, we hope that you've enjoyed it. If you have, the greatest gift you can do for us is to tell your friends. Tell your friends to tune in, that you're going to find great stories. Check out this story. We will come with more, and like us, follow us if you can, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks a ton.
Yeah.
Take care. Thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to Chris Waddell Living It for more stories on the adaptive community, the Paralympics, artists, athletes, entrepreneurs, experts in the experience of being human. Also follow us on Spotify, Apple, Facebook, and Instagram. I look forward to seeing you next week.